Thanks for joining us for this episode. And before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about any guest featured in this episode or access any content or resources discussed, be sure to check out the show notes in the episode description. We hope today's episode increases truth and inspires hope in the lives of your church, your business, your family, and beyond. Welcome to the Must Increase podcast.
All right, here we are. We are welcoming the one and only Jeremy Lenentine back to the podcast for the first time in quite a while. In fact, I think it is the first time, which this is so tragic. I think this is the first appearance you're making on the podcast in 2023. And I don't know how that happened because you were a frequent contributor for a year or two there. And then, I think what happened is life in ministry for you because you got a lot going on over there. So anyways, but it's good to have you back, Jeremy. Welcome back to the Must Increase podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, life in ministry and a brand new baby will do that to you. I feel like we haven't talked since COVID, but if it's just been this year, then I'll take it. So
yeah, no, it's not been that long, but yes, okay. I know you do have how old is the baby nowadays, by the way?
14 months.
Nice. You're still counting in months. Yeah.
Still in months. I think we do that till they're 12, but I don't know. So
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, today we're kind of taking more of a coaching approach, if you will, to the content we're going to cover. So let's dive right in. I mean, because we aired a coaching call that I had with another pastor here a few weeks ago, and you followed up with me after that, and we're like, hey, I have some questions myself. I wouldn't mind talking through, and you and I have these kind of conversations off the record all the time, and we were like, you know what, let's use this as an excuse to get you back on the podcast. So I'm gonna let you kind of lead and just let me know, kind of what you're thinking, what you want to talk about, and we'll just kind of start to unpack it as we go.
Yeah, so in thinking about how we wanted to cover this, I wanted to break it up into 3 segments. I've heard this broken up a lot of different ways, but if we could just do, marketing to cold, meaning people that don't know about your church and are really not in the market for a church. Warm, people who are looking for a church, maybe they've heard a little bit about you, but they would be interested in hearing your pitch, however you want to say that, in person or online. And then hot, those are people that are your internal. There's a lot of other ways you could say this, I know, but people that you already are coming to your church with some level of frequency, getting, messaging out to them, different stuff like that. I liked a lot of the stuff that you talked about on the last coaching call as well. So I'm going to kind of ask you to expand more upon it. For myself mostly, but I think it'd be really helpful, some of the stuff that you brought up. So if we could look at the best ways to reach those different folks. So let's start with the hot. All right. So these people that come to your church with some frequency, they would call you their church, whether or not they're just members or frequent attenders, however you want to say it. With this, if this is once a month, if this is 6 times a month, okay, they consider you their church. Okay. So you talked before, and I've heard you say that email marketing is the best type of marketing for the bang for your buck, right? So is that true even in the, in the hot category, people that are inside your church already?
Yes. And I would even say that it is more true for people in that category. A cold, you're not going to talk about, the kind of the cold, those who are completely unconnected, unaware really of your church at all. Cold emails on a general marketing perspective aren't too effective. Now, not to say they're completely ineffective, but cold ฬิapproach typically gets you put in people's spam folders, and a lot of times it comes across as annoying. When we think about email, who you want to target are people who are warm and even hot, if that's, or people who are, to use different terms, people who are interested and people who are already connected. That's typically how I categorize those people. And so when we look at it from the perspective of, the just non-church world, we see it all the time. You go to a website and it says, hey, we'll send you, a downloadable PDF of 5 free tips for whatever. You put in your email, they send it to you. But in the back of your head, I'm giving them permission now to email me. And so you're basically admitting, I am interested enough in this brand, organization, business, whatever, that I am okay with that. Now, I'm the kind of guy to where I'll do that and then I'll unsubscribe pretty quickly, just because I don't like my inbox getting cluttered with, marketing emails. There is some exception to that, though. There are certain email brands that email me that I do find their content so valuable, I remain connected with them. And so all that to say, yeah, I would say email is the most effective way to continue to reach those who are warm and hot. And in fact, as far as reaching those who are cold, email is not the way to go. What you're doing, reaching those who are cold, completely disconnected, and potentially and not even potentially interested, is what you want to do. That's where you use the channels like maybe social media, podcast, YouTube, to get people exposed to what you have to offer, potentially interested, to where they become a warm lead. I say once you have an email address, they really have become a somebody who is at least to some degree interested. And so all that to say, the email, I think churches in general are really missing out, because we spent that last coaching session, the one we're referring to, it was the one with Pastor Campbell from North Carolina, I believe it is. If those out there listening want to go back it up, it's just called, the episode was called Social Media Coaching, I believe. And so we talked about social media, but we didn't have time to get around to this, but I even say, when it comes to just continuing to cultivate a digital relationship with those who are interested and already connected with your church, use email more. And I think churches are missing that, because social media is so flashy and appealing. People just want to go, oh yeah, I just want to do social media, and that's cool. And whenever I tell people that email is more effective, so many people, they're like, no way. They don't believe me, but it's true. It really is. Statistically, email is the most effective form of marketing, because you're not at the mercy of algorithms. Now, again, you could get spammed, you could get put in the junk folder, things like that. But by and large, if you send somebody an email, they're going to get it. They're going to receive it. And so, and there are ways to tap into email, because now when I say that, people now say, okay, well, now I've got one more piece of content that I've got to come up with every week or every month or twice a month or however often I determine I want to send these emails. But the truth is, there's a lot that can be done where it's kind of like, set it up and you can let it run, and have that email connection. So I know that's kind of a long runway to maybe the rest of this conversation, but that's my argument, my case, if you will, for using email, especially for those who are warm, interested, and already connected with your church.
Okay, so for the sake of clarity, let's change the name of the buckets, because I like that better. So we'll say connected, interested, and then not interested, if that's okay,
yeah.
Right? And there won't be much to talk about there. Okay, sure. Okay, so connected. So again, inside your church. All right, so let me ask you this then. Before we had a conversation about it, I was telling you we were seeing email open rates on connected people be in the low 30%. Now, for people like you that do this all the time, you were kind of like, that's a great open rate. For us, just like casual, pastors who just use this casually, to me, that's a tragically low open rate, because it's like, if you said something and only 30% of your family heard it, there's no way to move that group forward. Okay, so here's my question to you. Should we just be okay with an open rate of 30, 33% for the connected folks? Or are there things that you can do? And I'm sure there are. So what are some things that you can do then to get more interest, to where you see that open rate, let's say, climb higher to 50%? I don't know, that'd be an insanely good open rate, right? But to push that number up.
Yeah, when it comes to your open rates and reading your metrics in general on the side of email, you want to keep in mind that actually what you're talking about, these numbers, 30+% is actually a really good open rate. Now, I will say, I'm not going to get into all the nuances of it, but things have changed a little bit over time, in that the way Apple changed some things about their privacy settings in their actual mail app. Now, I can't remember exactly who it affects. I think it's for those subscribed to certain Apple services. If you're using the native mail app on your phone or Mac or whatever, or iPad, it's going to somehow hide those open rates or hide those stats from, those email marketing services. And so that has caused the game to change a little bit. And so now what happens is a lot of times when you send those emails, Apple automatically marks those as open, even if they weren't open. And again, that's all just in the name of privacy. And I don't, it is what it is. So all that to say, whereas before we used to say a good open rate was 20+%, probably more like high 20% is a good open rate. But I know that still seems like a really low number. But here's what you have to keep in mind. The only number, that you really need to be worried about is your unsubscribe and spam rate. And if you have like a MailChimp is probably one of the most common marketing services or email marketing platforms out there, it gives you all of this. If you have an unsubscribe rate higher than probably 3-4%, then okay, be a little bit concerned. If you have a spam rate of, and I can't think on the numbers in my head of what a bad spam rate is, because it's pretty uncommon for you to get that high spam rate number and even that unsubscribe rate. And so those are the only two that it's like, oh, if you see those creeping into kind of like a danger zone, you need to be concerned. Otherwise, if your open rate is less than like 10%, okay, then there's things you need to work on to get your emails open. And the main thing is the subject line. You've got to have a captivating subject line that compels people to open. But you also have to be careful because you don't want to use, kind of too much of this gimmicky type of approach in getting people to open. There's one that I sent out a few years ago that it says, hey, I made a mistake. That was my subject line. And I got a really high open rate on that. And as I got into the email, it said, hey, I made a mistake. Actually, hey, I've made a lot of mistakes over the years and whatever and all that. Now, there's nothing wrong with using that occasionally. But if every week or every month even I had some type of gimmickly line like that, well, people are going to start to get the impression, okay, yeah, this guy's just trying to get me to open his email. And so, and really beyond the subject line, that's the name of the game. And not just email marketing, but content production in general, is I want to create and distribute and publish content that's going to provide value to people. And so that subject line is the reflection of is the ultimate reflection of that. So if you're a lot of people will do this, they'll do like their subject line will be like August monthly newsletter. Well, that's not very compelling. So yeah, your open rates are going to be pretty low about that. But if your newsletter features an article about, some sermon series, I'm using saying church about some, sermon series that's coming up or that you're in the midst of, that maybe is about, end times is always something that gets people interested, the last days. Okay, cool. Now people are probably going to be more compelled to open that email. So there are ways to get that open rate up. That said, once you can get those subject lines kind of dialed in and doing a good job of keeping them engaging, compelling, but without being gimmicky, here's another thing to keep in mind though. Your open rate, if you ever get your open rate consistently above 30%, like you should be the happiest person alive in terms of email marketing. That's probably as good as it's ever going to get. You might occasionally get 50% or more. That's going to be very rare. But here's the other thing to keep in mind. As long as that unsubscribe rate and that spam rate is low, what you have to remember is that means that content is still hitting people's inboxes. And even if they're opening the email or not, they're still seeing a digital presence from you. They're seeing hey, if you email from your church's name or your pastor's name or however you choose to do it and that subject line, even if they don't open it, even if they go, oh, okay, that's cool, and they just delete it or archive it or save it for later or whatever, it still reminds them that you exist. And they're probably going to open statistically, for example, if you have a 25% open rate, well, that tells me that most people are probably opening 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 emails. And so even if they're not opening every email, they're seeing every one of them, and they're not going, this is annoying, unsubscribe or spam. They're going, oh, yeah, that's that church. That's my church or the church I'm interested in or whatever. Very cool, awesome. But, I don't have time to read that right now. But man, it's good to know that they're there. And so you send an email out on a Tuesday and hey, now they're in your head all week. You're in their head rather all week, and maybe they'll just show back up on Sunday. So these metrics are important, but that open rate, again, having I worked with a non-church one time. And the business owner I was working with, they said, we want our open rates over 90%. And I said, well, I'm not the guy for the job. That's not going to happen, again, if I'm sure it's happened maybe once, it's like a hole in one. It happens very, very, very rarely. But that is when it comes to reading your metrics in email, don't get too worked up. Yes, if your open rate, I would say, is below 20%, you might want to consider upping your game in terms of your subject line. But if it is 20 to 30% or obviously more, then you're in a very good place as long as, again, the unsubscribe and spam rates are also staying low.
Okay, good. So better subject lines. And you had to go and say it. I just made this mistake in July. I put out literally my subject line was July newsletter. Like, it was so interesting. I'm sure that everyone wanted to rush to open it first thing that morning. Okay. All right. I can do that. So what different subject line, and then obviously, good content. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, the last call that you had, you were talking about, and it applies on social media. Maybe it applies in email marketing. I'm assuming it does. And you're talking about variety of content. This goes back to your, what were you doing? It was like 5 jabs for 1 blow, or basically
the jab, right hook. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Providing good quality content and then asking them to come to church or a big day or whatever else. And so it's like, give good stuff and then, throw out an ask from them, whatever. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about variety of content in relation to email marketing to your connected bucket?
Yeah. So in the world of church, as I kind of explained on that coaching call, this is going to apply to whether it's social media or email. Really, you got nothing technically to sell. Probably the biggest equivalent to selling would be asking someone to give, asking someone to give to either a general fund or a special project. And it's not to say that you wouldn't do that, but I would say that would be an incredibly rare thing that you would do. So the next kind of probably equivalent to making the sale in the world of church is giving them an invitation to actually join you for some type of commitment. So whether that be the Sunday service or some other type of, connection group or, monthly activity, things like that, or even just a special event. That is an ask, because you're saying, hey, actually, in most cases, you're saying, we need you to get in your car and drive to us and come to where we are at. And that may not be directly asking for again, money in terms of like saying, hey, this is because most of the time church events are free, maybe with some exception. But you're saying, we need you to make an investment of time, and energy and effort. And, if you got kids, everybody's got to get ready, all that stuff. And so that is the sale, if you will. That's probably in most cases, the biggest example of a sale or a big ask that you can put out there. So, that's why for me, social media, email, it doesn't matter. What you're trying to do is constantly still figure out a way to provide value that kind of subtly says, we're coming to you, you don't have to come to us. And so that could look like, hey, here is, for example, every week you're doing weekly preaching and teaching. And so, hey, here's the latest video of this past Sunday's message, or here's a podcast link to it, or whatever that may be. That to me is the simplest way to do it, because you can do that literally every week, or maybe even multiple times a week. You can just be constantly sending out an email, hey, here's a link to the service, check it out. And then, there's others that go above and beyond, and, they might produce extra content that is maybe designed to be digital first, and that it's designed to just be put on YouTube and on social media and whatnot. And you send that content to them. And so that is sending that kind of content out is going to be more, you have to keep that in mind. Like, I have to send a balance of that before I make an ask for them to come. Now, something with email that's kind of unique that you can do that maybe you couldn't really do as much with social media is, as you're making we're using MailChimp as an example, some type of software like that. Well, you're able to kind of make these email templates. And so what you can do with the email is, like, in the footer of every email, you can kind of put some information like, hey, join us for weekly services, put your service times, visit us, visit our website, connect with us here, even put a link to a digital connection card, things like that. You can kind of get away with kind of always having that in the footer of your email. But I would say, if you're going to be before, and it's not to say you wouldn't ever send out an email that invites people to church. Of course not. But you just got to keep that balance in mind. Now, with email, and in the case of church, because again, you aren't trying to sell something, you're just asking them to come to you. I think you can get away with a little bit fewer jabs before you do, like we said, that right hook, or try to make the sale, if we keep using the marketing terms. And so, for example, you could send out maybe a couple of emails during the week that provides content where you're going to them. And then you can, towards the end of the week, and say, hey, and join us for services this weekend. And so that's just maybe some examples of how that can play out in the email marketing. And again, it's kind of the same principles that you'd use in social media as well. But as far as email marketing, that's kind of the approach that you can take to, again, say, we're gonna come to you more often than we ask you to come to us.
Okay, staying in this connected bucket. Okay, so better subject lines, good content, variety of content, helpful content over always asking for someone to do something. Okay. Do you recommend, or have you seen people use text reminders to route them to something else, be it YouTube video or email or whatever? Now, email marketing like MailChimp or whatever is extremely cheap in comparison to text marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is there any recommendations you have to make about text marketing, or is it just kind of too expensive for most churches to put it in their kind of budget?
Yeah, like you're saying, texting has a very costly component, because you're at the mercy of the carriers. So Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, they are charging essentially for texting, for an organization, a business to text out. And so that's where that cost kind of comes from. Now, that said, it's usually on a per uses basis. I've struggled to find, I'm sure it probably exists in some capacity. Like, for example, with MailChimp, you can use MailChimp or email marketing. You can use that for free until you surpass like 1,000 email subscribers. And then they start to charge you just a flat monthly fee based on how many email subscribers you have. Whereas with texting, from what I've noticed, all the services I've seen, is it's kind of not a flat fee. It's a per use fee. And so it just depends on how many messages you're sending. And so for that reason alone, I say, yeah, just be very, very cautious and strategic. And you're not going to be as frequent in texting as you are in email. Definitely not. And not just for a cost reason, but also for a reason of just staying in the good graces of your audience. Because email, when somebody emails me, I'm like, okay, cool. Email is just kind of standard business. Yeah, there's some spammy emails that are annoying, but again, if I've opted in to receive them in particular, or, I get a personal email from a friend, okay, cool. Like I can get to that when I get to it. When I get a text, there's something different about kind of the vibe, if you will, that carries, at least for me, is I go, okay, you texted me. You texted my personal cell phone number, and to me, that's just a little bit more intrusive. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't use it, that you can't do it, but again, working with that same business I was referring to earlier, they were just blasting text messages out 3, 4, 5 times a week. And they were getting a lot of just people opting out. And because it is just a so much more intrusive way of reaching people, but it's a very effective way of reaching people. So you have to just be very cautious in how you use it, and really how often. And the nature of texting would be like, I don't know if the jab, right hook is going to apply so much. I think every time you text, you're just sending out something that you believe is really valuable or important, whether it's a we're coming to you or asking you to come to us type of text. Like, I would see nothing wrong with, let's say you've got 4, 5, 6 big events at your church throughout the year, Christmas, Easter, maybe a vacation Bible school for kids, these types of things. I see nothing wrong with sending out maybe one text reminder or one, maybe 2 text reminders for each of those type of events. But I don't think it's something that you just blast a text out and go, hey, check out last week's sermon. Now save that for email. It could be something where your pastor has a special announcement and it says, hey, boom, hey, check this out. Here's a link to a video. But by and large, like it's a whole different kind of world and how it's used and how it's received. And so it's hard for me to even say what the exact rules are with it. I just say be very intentional is really what it comes down to, and very and even infrequent. 1, maybe 2 text messages a month on average is what I would recommend. Otherwise, you're going to get people that are just like, people can receive multiple emails a week from an organization and not really be bothered by it. But texting, again, I say 1, maybe 2 a month on average. And so again, you just have to be really intentional and strategic with how you use it.
We are so glad you joined us for this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends. You can connect with us online at mustincrease.com, and if you'd like a topic or question to be featured on a future episode, send us a text to 615-900-4461. Thanks again for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time as we continue to increase truth and inspire hope in the lives of others right here on the Must Increase podcast.